Well, hello and welcome to Conscious Ear. This is where I take my passion for mindfulness and apply it to everyday living. And so I'm doing that with my first guest this evening, who is an old friend and a former colleague who is also interested in coaching work. And his line of coaching is financial life coaching. So I'd like to welcome my friend, Rick Painter.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me on your channel. I appreciate that. You know, old friends, I do have gray hair, so calling me old, but I get it. That's all right. Even though we did meet in middle school. And so yes, we've known each other for a long time in middle school. But I appreciate you having me on this channel as we work towards kind of our goals now that we have and our passion. My passion has become financial life coach. And now we're in a spot where we can go and help people with our individual passions.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for letting me call you old. Yes, and just to clarify, Rick and I met in middle school as teachers and counselors, and then moved on to high school as well. So it's kind of like having like an old friend that you keep in contact. We've maintained that, and I really appreciate it. So yes, so finances, financial life coach is your title. I just want to take a minute, and of course I have to, with my interest being mindfulness, just to pay attention to what comes up when we think of money, when we think of finances, and how that kind of is digested in our nervous systems. So when I think of money, and I'm going to take a minute, so if you're watching, feel free to do this or do it on your own, but I think it's a really important part of this is to just pause and, hear me say the words money, finance, banking, money, credit cards, okay? And think about what has happened since I've said those words. And I'll use myself as an example. I feel it viscerally. Like I feel it mostly in kind of the pit of my stomach. I get a little tense, and I have this feeling of like, I don't know if I want to talk about this, right? So maybe some of you also have the same feeling. Maybe not, and that's great. You're a little further along the path. Let me know anything that you've learned at Conscious Ear. But I think most of us, it's just something that means a lot of work. It brings up old feelings of maybe not having done something right. And so I think it's worth noting why we should be maybe mindful about this topic. Rick, I'd like to start by asking, what is your relationship with money? And if you want, also, what got you interested in personal finance? Were you always interested in it, or did an event or did someone help you along the way? How did that unfold for you?
Well, thanks, Ann. I just want to say too that I think your feelings are normal when it comes to money. I think a lot of people feel stress, frustration. I think when people hear banking, credit cards, finance, they think, oh, I got to only be invested in stocks. So there's a multiple feelings that I think people start to feel. And I think money is a lot more simple than what we think and what we've been taught. We've never been taught in elementary, middle school, high school, even in college, how to go about using our money. I grew up in a home. My mom was a tax accountant. My brother's a CPA, and I was not really interested in money. Grew up, I understood money, that, I was supposed to save it, but then you go on through life, got a job, just, start spending money, and then, have kids, progress. And then after that, started getting in debt, and then trying to figure out, man, I'm continuing to get in debt. This isn't really where I want to be. So then my wife and I started talking about it and got on the same page about, okay, hey, here's our finances. Let's figure out how we're going to go about getting out of debt. And even through that process, I knew that our money habits weren't right. And so just trying to figure out, how do we go about processing this money? How do I go about figuring out how to use this money in a wise way? Because not everybody needs to be in debt. We've been told that debt is good, but it adds a lot more stress. So looking at our finances with my wife and I got me really excited about, hey, we can get out of debt. And I want to be able to help people, show them how they can get out of debt, how they can live a stress-free life, how they can sleep through the night and not live paycheck to paycheck. So to me, that is fun, helping people to realize that they don't have to have that money stress all the time. Let's take this reward that you're getting for working, see how you can budget it and get out of debt and live a fulfilling life, so that you're not stressed all the time. So I got into finances by basically being in debt and not being in control of my finances and going, okay, this isn't right. So as being a counselor in a school, I enjoy helping people. And this is a way that I feel like can help a lot more people. And I want people to be free to talk about their finances, because I think there's a lot of shame that's involved in that. I don't want people to have the shame. I want people to be able to enjoy their money, not live paycheck to paycheck, and then eventually become generous givers with the wealth that they build.
Oh, I love it. So much to love there. First of all, your passion definitely comes through, and I love to see that. One of the other things that you mentioned is what I interpret as we all have kind of a common story when it comes to money, right? And that common story is we kind of don't really have, number one, the background, the schooling, I'm sure we all had maybe some early lessons with money, whether it was allowance or a savings account, but we all seem to have a common story of goofing up before it gets better. And to me, that is, it's comforting. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to share a story, if I can, real quick, about a friend of mine, while we're talking about relationship to money, and a success story, which is her and her husband paying off her house. So I just talked to her last week, and we had plans to talk in the evening, and she's like, sorry, I got to cancel. We paid off our house and we're going to celebrate. And as I was congratulating her, I said, that's so exciting. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, tell me more. And she's like, when her mom had passed a few years ago, they took the money from her estate and bought the home, put a good sizable down payment. And then her husband's mother recently passed. And as they kind of finalized the estate, he decided that they would take that money and pay off the house. They had been making their mortgage payment plus a little bit more. So this was something that they were concentrating on. And so her hesitation of like, well, yeah, it's good, was because that they used all of their savings. So their nest egg was gone. And so I understood that, but I think she's going to be a lot happier down the road. What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, I think that's amazing. What she's done is take risk out of their environment. They have no more debt, they have no more house payment. So now, because they have no more debt, no more house payment, every month, instead of making those payments to the bank, to Discover, American Express, to whatever your mortgage lender is, that money, let's say if it's a $1,500 house payment, minus escrow. So, let's just say it's $1,000. So they're paying themselves $1,000 a month. So instead of giving somebody else, so they're going to get that money back very quickly. And so, I think it's amazing when people see how they can budget out their money, that it's possible to be able to pay your house off. It's possible to not have a car payment. It's possible to be able to pay cash for numerous different things to eliminate all of that risk of having debt.
Yeah, yeah. I get that. You think you need some sort of savings, or that is, in the back of your head. Um, what what should we have in savings? Is there a idea of how much? I've heard of things like emergency funds. What's the difference between saving too much and having debt versus having an emergency fund?
Great question. And I think that question comes up quite a bit. I think people keep thinking, oh no, I need to save, I need to save, I need to save. So let's say you saved $20,000, but then you have 30,000 worth of debt. And so you're like, oh, I'm going to keep saving every month. Well, you could take that $20,000 and put it towards your debt and then pay off the rest of that debt fairly quickly. What I like to tell people is, when you start making a plan to budget, I tell people, at first put aside $1,000, and that's your very first emergency fund. So $1,000, make sure it's liquid, which basically cash, or in a bank account that you can get it out that same day, because something's going to happen. You might get a flat tire, or you might have a quick medical expense, something that might come up right away. So have that first $1,000. After you get that, then pay off all of your debt as quick as you can. You don't need to put other money in savings at that time. It's a time to work on paying your debt. I like to tell people use the debt snowball, so paying off your smallest debt, working towards your largest debt. Then after you have that, I recommend that people put 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund. So whatever your expenses are for the month, figure that out. And then if you feel like your job's secure, maybe it's the 3 months emergency. Or if you feel like I really feel more comfortable with the 6 months emergency fund, so whatever 6 months worth of expenses would be, then you have no debt and you have a 6 months emergency fund. Maybe at some point you're like, I hate my job, I want to go somewhere else. Well, then you also have an emergency fund that you have 6 months to be able to find something else. Obviously, you're going to have to build that back up, but that makes you be able to focus a little bit better and understand that you can go somewhere else. And if you do lose your job, you have security with a 3 to 6 months emergency fund in place. And then if you were to budget, you know what your goals are. So I don't think there's ever saving too much. It's just understanding what to do with your money.
Right. That's a great question. And I won't put you on the spot, but I bet there's a lot of people right now that may have burned through their emergency savings due to COVID. You can still do budgets and still begin to build that up when there's financial insecurity. Can you not?
Yeah. So when you're, the biggest thing is to pay off your debt. So then you're eliminating that risk. So if you were to lose a job, you don't have any more debt, and you can go find something fairly quick that's temporary. So once you have that debt, then go and start paying start filling up your emergency fund.
Yeah, that makes sense. This whole COVID, some people really are feeling that, right? Where you did have your savings and now it might not be what you're used to it being. So thinking about just our general money habits, what would you say is the biggest money habit of most people? A habit that's not good, a habit that's unconscious, a habit that most people aren't even thinking about this. What would that be, do you think?
Well, I want to go back and answer your other question as well, too. I think the research shows that most people can't even handle a $600 emergency if they had that. So by paying the debt, and building up an emergency fund, people will feel like they would have a raise. What's the biggest thing that people don't do with money is have a written budget every month and understand what they spend. So let me ask you a question if I can put you on the spot. So if you go to the grocery store, so however many times you go to the grocery store, do you know what your grocery budget is for the month?
Well, I currently do not. I currently just started with the new year, putting our budget back into a spreadsheet. So January was beginning to track how much money is going to groceries. So I'll say, no, I do not. So I guess that's right. People don't know, right? Is that your point?
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you have a spreadsheet and you're budgeting out to figure out, how much is coming in, how much is going out, what can we afford, what can't we afford. But I think what happens is people start to do a budget 1 month, and because it's new, people get frustrated. So it's going to take at least 3 months to figure it out, and then you need to have a budget every month. It's not, oh, I budgeted once, I know what my budget looks like, and now it's over and done. There's multiple things, that happen each month. 1 month you might have car insurance due, or you might have your registration due, or you might have multiple people's birthday this month. So every month your budget changes by a little bit. And so you need to make sure you do that every month. That's not something that I think a lot of people give a conscious ear to about what their budget, what their money looks like coming in and going out.
Yeah, you are exactly right. And I want to give you credit when I think of my own kind of relationship to money. Um, again, it hasn't always been good. But I remember years ago when you were first starting, kind of getting into this and sharing your own interest and excitement in this subject. I would listen to you, and I actually followed some of your advice. And that was the first time I put a spreadsheet together. And it's true, like I did it for, I think it was 2.5, 3 years, which got us out of all credit card debt. You also had a great tip, about groceries and putting cash into envelopes. I did that like faithfully, and really looking, taking the new year to like get back in that situation, because our family has been affected by COVID and every single penny matters. So I just want to thank you for the things that you were just sharing as you were processing and doing yourself. Really made a difference in my family's financial outlook. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Ann. I'm excited for you. I'm glad that you were able to pay off all those debts, and that's what I want to be able to help people do. I think we've been sold these myths all of our life that you're going to have a car payment, or you need to have a lease payment, or you need to have a credit card, and you're going to always have debt no matter what. Whatever it is, there's always going to be debt. And you're an example of that. I'm an example of that. No, you don't always have to have debt. If you focus on it, you can pay it off. 2 to 3 years most of the time can get all of your debt paid off. But a lot of times people don't want to put the hard work into sitting down, having the budget, and being able to pay it off. But what I want to be able to do is show people you can do this. See how much you're paying all of these other people. See how much you're making, how rich you're making MasterCard, Visa, all of the banks and the car companies. How about giving you that wealth when that paycheck comes, instead of going, oh, I have no more money because my paycheck came and I paid everybody else. How about, oh, I paid all of my, I have no more debt. So now I get a paycheck. Now I'm excited because that money comes to me. And now I'm going to figure out, okay, I'm saving this much for vacation. I'm putting this much in my retirement account. I'm giving this much to these organizations. And so it just makes a huge difference when you're out of debt, and just the joy that you can get from receiving a paycheck instead of that frustration of getting it and not being able to pay your bills or knowing how you're going to take care of things at home.
I love that. Speaking of the joy of a paycheck, and many of us would probably say, where's the joy? Money in, money out. And then you're just working, like you say, paycheck to paycheck. I love two things. I just want to bring up this point. You assisting people really with finding freedom. You know, when we don't have debt, that's the ultimate freedom. And honestly, that whole spreadsheet, getting out of credit card debt, was a part of my transition of, you know, ending one career and beginning another one, because honestly, I didn't have the freedom to do that in a certain situation with the credit card debt. And so that allowed me to have the freedom to say, you know what, like I can switch jobs. I can, you know, have a real sense of freedom. So I love that you bring that up. The second thing is just this normalizing debt. You know, that debt is, you know, going to college, normal to rack up 50, 60, even more in debt, starting our careers. You know, I think of poor doctors and teachers and anyone in service, but really anybody that has to begin their life in debt. And of course, healthcare. You know, we have normalized the fact that it's okay to be in debt to receive healthcare. So thank you for bringing those 2 points up. Any other comments?
No, I think, sorry, I agree with you that, thanks for supporting those ideas, you know, that we have normalized it, like you said, with even going to school. We think, oh, we've got to take out all of these loans, you know, no matter what. Well, if we were really to sit down and figure out and say, okay, let me go a little bit slower and not take out loans for it, but let me figure out how I'm going to pay cash for it. Maybe I'm going to live at home. Maybe there's something a little bit different. How am I going to do that? And then when I get out of college, I have no debt. So I have the freedom to not necessarily take the first job that comes about, but I have the freedom to be like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound like what I want to do. I would rather go over here and take this job. So you have the freedom. And like you said, it is a financial freedom when you don't have debt. It's like, you know, having a backpack and then throwing bricks on it. The more debt we get, you know, we get out of college, we're like, okay, I've got to get a car. All right, great. There's my first brick I'm going to put in my back that I'm going to walk around with. And then, okay, then I need to get a credit card because I need to go to an apartment, but I need to buy furniture. So let me throw another brick in my backpack, you know. So you're walking around with the stress of all of that debt. So, you know, if we had all of that paid off, then we're walking around without that backpack with all of those bricks, and we have financial freedom without the stress of all of that debt.
That's such an important distinction, right? Like, one of my questions to you was, how does money translate into personal power? And I think you just answered that. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, personal power is great. I think I've helped a couple people with their budget, and they were stressed because they were living paycheck to paycheck, not sleeping because they're frustrated with their finances. Once we created a budget, they felt like they've gotten a raise. They're able to sleep at night because they know where their money is going. Instead of their money telling it where to go, they're telling their money where to go. And so it has reduced the stress that they have in their life because they are able to control that. So a lot of times it's us knowing how to control our controllables. So many things in life we can't control, but let's figure out what we can control and how can we do that. And money is a huge thing in our life. And if we just let it go, we're going to continue to be stressed for the rest of our lives. And we don't need to be. It's something that can be worked out very quickly and very easily. Just take the time and give the conscious ear to your money to figure out what's going on with your money.
Exactly. Another thing that I think about when I think of personal power that money brings is also how we choose to spend money. I was watching I think it was like an NETV. It was a really exciting Sunday afternoon at the house. But there was this segment it was local, and it was about the facts of purchasing things locally, or, of locally owned businesses versus big box corporations. And the example that I came up with it, because I liked it so much, the fact they gave was that, for every dollar spent locally, 52 cents of that dollar stays here locally versus 14 cents. And I immediately thought, well, we need to promote Mangelsons. I think of all the people that go to Hobby Lobby because they have everything. Well, the original local Hobby Lobby was Mangelsons. I mean, they have everything. So I think of that when it comes to personal power of supporting local communities. Can you think of any other ways, or do you have any comments on creating your personal power by purchasing locally?
I like the supporting the mom and pop businesses, the local, your neighbors. We all want to help our neighbors, and I think that's excellent to support our local businesses. And I think one way that we can do that is when we go and support them, that we pay cash instead of using credit cards. When we use our credit cards, they're paying a 2 to 5% transaction fee. So they're losing money when you're using a credit card. So if you're going to go and you're going to use cash, they're going to be able to keep even more in their pocket. So when I say cash, yeah, it can be regular cash, or maybe you write an old school check, but those would be great ways to help support your local businesses instead of swiping the card for them being charged for that transaction fee. That way they can keep more money in their pockets.
So question then, when you go to a store and they say credit or debit, does debit keep more money for the store owner then? Is that the same as cash as well, or no?
That I'm not familiar with that question
Okay.
as much. I'm not sure. I would assume it's just the credit. I'm assuming the debit, it's a local bank, so I'm assuming debit would be not the transaction fee, but I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Oh, excellent. I was just at the book where I'm buying, a book locally, and they asked me that. Not, and now that I think about it, the pet store that we go to is also local, and they ask, but other big places don't tend to do that. I don't know. I'm off on a tangent, but something to find out for sure. So what is one thing, you've given us a ton of things, but what is one thing that everybody should do? You've already highlighted kind of the budgeting, but is there anything else that if people really are like, I'm not doing a budget, I'm not there, maybe I'll think about it. Maybe we got them thinking, right? And starting to be mindful. Hopefully this will stick with them for a while. But what is one thing that everyone should be doing with their money?
I think if they're not going to budget, the other thing would be to pay off your debt. So that would be the number one thing. If you're not going to budget, make sure that you get rid of all of your debts as quick as you can. Set up a schedule of, hey, this is when I want to pay this debt off. Like I said, I like using the debt snowball method. You take your smallest debt, pay that off, and then work towards paying off your next highest debt. And get that knocked out. It shows you motivation. You get some quick wins. So I think that would be the number one thing. And I think the other thing too, I guess you asked for one, I'm going to tell you two. So the other thing I think is to use the cash envelope system. Like you said, I think that would help people stay in their category, for groceries. Let's say you say, okay, I'm going to spend $150 a week on groceries. So I'm going to take out $150 and put it in my cash envelope. When I go to the store, I only have $150. I don't have a credit card on me. I don't have a debit card. This is all I have. So whatever I can get with $150, that's what I'm going to get. Same thing for going out to eat or any other type of entertainment. Maybe you're going to say, okay, I'm only going to spend $200 this month on entertainment. Well, how do I stick with that $200? Well, let's do a cash envelope. And when I'm out of that $200, then I'm done. There's kind of a difference when you go to the store and you pay cash for an item or if you use a credit card. There is, it hurts more to pay cash because there's a behavior that you go, and I'm really giving up. Do I really want this item? Where if I use a credit card, I'm like, oh, okay, there's no emotion attached to the credit card or, even a debit card, there's not really an emotion until you see it come out of your checking account. But the emotion happens when you spend cash. So that would be my thing, is to use the cash envelopes and to pay off your debt.
I love that, Rick, and I'm glad you brought up the emotion of it, which is why this is such a perfect topic to be mindful about, right? We're just, used to handing over the card and going, oops, that was too much, and shifting money around. There is a definite stickiness, is what I would call it, when you're handing over cash. And it makes you think, do I really need 3 chocolate bars? And this is a conversation that I have. Okay, one is enough, but it makes you think about that. You're really being mindful of what you need right now. And it kind of keeps you in line for other things, right? Sometimes we discover other habits and needs that we have, comforts of, maybe that comes into play, makes me think of like toilet paper and some people that were stockpiling. It really gets down to like habits of comfort and needs to feel safe and secure. But that's another topic. But definitely love that idea that, when you spend cash, it's connected to your emotions. Love that. Any final things that you'd want to share about money, or things that we should be mindful of?
Yeah, I think one of the things when I tell people I'm a financial life coach and I like to help people with their finances, one of the things that I get is, man, how do I change my credit score? I've got a terrible credit score. And as I've kind of been in this space a little bit, I've kind of changed my mindset. I used to be, oh, okay, well, let's figure out how to get a high credit score. And if you want that, I can help you with that. But what finding out with their high credit score, basically what it's saying is, how many open lines of credit do you have? How well do you pay your debt? And that's basically what the high credit score is showing you. Okay, I have numerous credit cards, but I pay them off all the time. Or I have other loans, but I pay my loans. So that's what the credit score is showing you. My wife and I had a very high credit score. We also had a significant amount of debt. Well, once we paid off all of that debt, and I went and I was like, well, we don't need all these credit cards either because we're paying everything in cash. So there's no reason to have all of these credit cards and all of this anymore. So credit score went from an 820 to I think it's 623 or something like that. So it like dropped significantly. But for me, I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm not planning to take a loan out. The only reason I would need a high credit score is if I wanted to take a loan and pay interest later on. And that's not something I'm interested in doing. So I'm trying to help people to understand that you don't necessarily need a high credit score. If you just pay cash for things, you don't even need a credit score. If you're going to buy a house, you can do underwriting. If you're going to rent an apartment, they might ask for 2 months rent up front instead of the 1 month deposit. So yeah, maybe it takes a little bit more work, because if you're going to go buy a car, instead of taking out a loan, you save up the cash and you buy a cash car. Maybe it's your first car is $2,000 to $5,000 and you get that. And then later on, you save up because you don't have a car payment. So you're paying yourself. So then a couple years down the road, then you buy a $10,000 car, and then you sell that and you move up. So it's easy enough to do. You just have to plan for it a little bit. So I guess my overall thing is, I don't want people to worry about their credit score. I want people to get out of debt and start paying cash for everything.
That's really good advice, because I think most of us would agree, credit scores, I mean, it's like getting a grade in school, right? Like it's something that, you either dread or are really proud of and maybe not even know why, right? So it's like, oh, I have a lot of debt. I've paid it off. So that's a really good, really good information to know. One of the things Conscious Ear is interested in is not only maybe financial talk, as it were tonight, but what has your ear lately? Are there any authors, people, podcasts, music that you are personally listening to, Rick?
Yeah, there are a couple. And it's funny with money, because money is sometimes a behavior that comes from somewhere else that we learned, or maybe it's some other trauma. And so there's a guy called Dr. John Deloney who I've been listening to on podcasts, and kind of basically a therapist, and people call in and talk about life issues, that they have an issue with money, but it's really not an issue with money. It's an issue with something else. So it's kind of intriguing as a counseling perspective on money. So I've been enjoying his podcast. And then I'm also reading the Millionaire Next Door, just talking about millionaires in the United States, and just the amount of people who are first generational millionaires, and that millionaires are driving 2-year-old cars. They're not buying the brand new cars. They're not living in the nicest houses in the city. So just those are the things that have my ear right now.
Well, those sound really interesting. I love the first one, of course. I'm not going deep here, but with mindfulness, it opens the door to who we really are and our habits. So that might be a nice resource for some of our listeners. Oh my gosh, our time's almost up. I've loved this, Rick. It's just like chatting, but not getting interrupted like we always did at school. What do you have going on? Do you have any events, or how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I have an event coming up February 20th from 10:30 to noon. It's called Painting Your Financial Future. And you can also look on my Facebook page. It's called Painting Your Financial Future. There'll be a link to the event there. And so basically, kind of walking you through every step by step that we talked about tonight, but giving you the spreadsheet, giving you the step by step of how to go about to get out of debt. What are your goals? How do you do that? So that's what I'm going to be teaching in that class. So again, that's February 20th from 10:30 to noon. People can also reach out to me. I do individual financial life coaching if people want that service. Usually 3 to 6 months is the first start, because we've got to figure out what your money habits are, what your behaviors are like. So people can reach me at RickPainterFLC at gmail.com. So Rick Painter Financial Life Coach at gmail.com. Or people can text me at 402-212-9863. I'd be more than happy to work with people on an individual basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. You couldn't have a nicer, more well-versed guy help you with your finances. I wish you all the best, and I'm so happy for you and your new endeavor.
Well, thanks, Anna. I greatly appreciate you having me on your channel. It's been a fun conversation, and hope our people on your channel have learned a little bit, and will give the conscious ear to their money habits.
I love it. Thanks so much, Rick. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time when we bring mindfulness into our everyday living. Good night.